The rain hammered against the windows of the Hartley house on Maple Street, a relentless drumming that had become background noise to 32-year-old Emma Hartley. She stood in the dim hallway of her childhood home, surrounded by cardboard boxes and the musty smell of decades-old memories. Her mother had passed away 3 weeks ago, leaving Emma the sole heir to a house she hadn't set foot in for nearly 15 years. The house felt smaller than she remembered, darker. The wallpaper, once a cheerful yellow, had faded to a sickly beige, peeling at the corners like old skin. Emma's footsteps echoed on the hardwood floors as she moved through rooms filled with furniture draped in white sheets, ghosts of a life she'd tried hard to forget. She was about to head upstairs when something caught her eye in what used to be her father's study. The door stood ajar, and through the gap she could see the edge of an ornate mirror she didn't recognize. Emma pushed the door open slowly. The hinges creaked, a sound that sent an involuntary shiver down her spine. The mirror dominated the far wall, easily 7 feet tall, framed in dark wood carved with intricate patterns of vines and thorns. The glass itself seemed oddly pristine for something that had been hidden away in this forgotten room. Emma approached it cautiously, her reflection growing clearer with each step. She looked tired. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her auburn hair hung limp around her shoulders. But there was something else. As she stared at her reflection, she could have sworn she saw movement in the background, behind her reflected form. Emma spun around. The room was empty, just old bookshelves, a dusty desk, and the persistent sound of rain. When she turned back to the mirror, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was her brother, Marcus. "Hey," she answered, still staring at her reflection. "Emma, did you make it to the house?" Marcus's voice was strained, tired. He lived in Boston now, too far to help with the estate. "Yeah, I'm here. Marcus, did Mom ever mention a mirror? A big, old one in Dad's study?" There was a pause. "No. Why? There's this mirror here. It's huge, ornate. I don't remember ever seeing it before. Mom kept a lot of Dad's things locked up after he died. Maybe it was his. Listen, Em, I can't talk long. Just be careful going through everything, okay? Some of those floorboards are rotted." "I will. Love you." "Love you too." Emma ended the call and looked back at the mirror. In the fading afternoon light, the carved frame seemed to shift, the thorns appearing sharper, more menacing. She reached out and touched the glass. It was ice cold, colder than it should have been in the stuffy room. That night, Emma stayed in her old bedroom upstairs. She'd brought an air mattress and sleeping bag, too exhausted to drive back to her apartment in downtown Portland. The house settled around her with groans and creaks, the sounds of old wood expanding and contracting. But there was another sound, too, a soft tapping, rhythmic and persistent, coming from downstairs. Emma tried to ignore it, pulling the sleeping bag over her head, but the tapping continued, growing louder, more insistent. Finally, at 2:47 a.m., according to her phone, she gave up. She grabbed her flashlight and crept downstairs, her heart pounding. The tapping was coming from the study. Emma's hand trembled as she pushed open the door. The flashlight beam swept across the room, landing on the mirror. In its reflection, she saw herself, pale and frightened. But behind her reflection, in the mirror's version of the room, she saw something that made her blood run cold. There was a woman standing in the corner. She wore a nightgown, her long, dark hair covering her face. She wasn't moving, just standing there, perfectly still. Emma whirled around, shining the light into the actual corner. Nothing. Empty. But when she looked back at the mirror, the woman was closer now, just a few feet behind her reflected self. Emma backed out of the room, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. She slammed the door shut and ran upstairs, locking herself in the bedroom. She didn't sleep for the rest of the night. When morning came, grey and overcast like most Oregon mornings, Emma convinced herself it had been her imagination, a trick of exhaustion and grief. She made coffee in the old kitchen, the familiar ritual calming her nerves. But as she stood at the sink, looking out at the overgrown backyard, she couldn't shake the image of that woman in the mirror. She decided to research the mirror. If it had belonged to her father, maybe there were records, receipts, something that could explain where it came from. Emma spent the morning going through her father's desk, finding old bills, letters, and photographs. Her father, Thomas Hartley, had been a quiet man, an accountant who died of a heart attack when Emma was 17. She'd never been particularly close to him, but seeing his handwriting again brought a wave of unexpected sadness. In the bottom drawer, hidden beneath a stack of tax returns from 1995, Emma found a leather journal. The cover was worn, the pages yellowed with age. She opened it carefully. The first entry was dated January 15th, 1994. "I bought the mirror today," her father had written in his neat, precise script. "The antique dealer said it came from an estate sale in Salem, a family named Morrison. He warned me about it, said there were stories, but I didn't listen. I never listen. The mirror is beautiful, and Margaret will love it." Margaret, Emma's mother. She flipped through the pages. The entries became increasingly erratic, the handwriting messier. March 3rd, 1994. "I see things in the mirror, things that aren't there. Margaret says I'm working too much, that I need rest, but I know what I see. There's a woman. She watches me." April 10th, 1994. "I tried to get rid of the mirror today. Hired movers to take it away, but when they touched it, one of them collapsed. Heart attack just like that. The mirror stays. I locked it in the study. Margaret doesn't go in there anymore." May 22, 1994. "I know who she is now. I found records at the library, the Morrison family. There was a daughter, Sarah. She died in 1952. They found her in front of this mirror. Her throat was cut. They never found who did it, but I know. God help me, I know." The journal entries stopped after that. Emma's hands shook as she closed the book. Her father had known about the woman in the mirror. He'd seen her too. Emma pulled out her laptop and searched for information about the Morrison family. It didn't take long to find. The case had been sensational in its time. Sarah Morrison, age 23, found dead in her bedroom on the morning of October 31st, 1952. The room had been locked from the inside. No weapon was ever found. The police ruled it a suicide, but her family insisted she would never have taken her own life. There were photographs accompanying the old newspaper articles. Emma clicked on one, and her screen filled with an image of Sarah Morrison. Dark hair, pale skin, sad eyes. She looked exactly like the woman Emma had seen in the mirror. But there was something else in the photograph. Sarah was standing in front of a mirror, the same mirror that now sat in Emma's father's study, and in the reflection, barely visible, was another figure. A man standing behind Sarah, his hand reaching toward her throat. Emma zoomed in on the image, her heart racing. The man's face was blurred, indistinct, but there was something familiar about him. She stared at the photograph for a long moment before it hit her. The man in the mirror looked like her father, but that was impossible. Thomas Hartley hadn't been born until 1948. He would have been 4 years old when Sarah Morrison died. It couldn't be him, could it? Emma's mind raced. She thought about her father's journal entries, about how he'd said he knew who killed Sarah. Had he meant the mirror itself? Some kind of supernatural force? But no, Emma didn't believe in ghosts or curses. There had to be a rational explanation. She decided to go back to the study, to look at the mirror in the daylight when she could think clearly. But as she stood up, her phone rang. It was Detective Rivera from the Portland Police Department. "Ms. Hartley, this is Detective Rivera. I'm sorry to bother you during this difficult time, but I need to ask you some questions about your mother's death." Emma's blood ran cold. Questions. I thought it was natural causes. Heart failure. That's what the initial report said, yes, but we've received some new information. Can you come down to the station? An hour later, Emma sat in a grey interrogation room, her hands wrapped around a styrofoam cup of terrible coffee. Detective Rivera, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a serious expression, sat across from her. "Miss Hartley, when was the last time you spoke to your mother?" "About 2 months ago. We weren't close. We had a falling out years ago." "Can you tell me what the falling out was about?" Emma hesitated. "It was about my father. After he died, my mother changed. She became paranoid, reclusive. She wouldn't leave the house. I tried to get her help, but she refused. Eventually, I had to walk away for my own sanity." Detective Rivera nodded, making notes. "Did your mother ever mention anything unusual happening in the house? Strange occurrences? Things she couldn't explain?" "No." "Why are you asking me this?" The detective pulled out a photograph and slid it across the table. It showed Emma's mother, Margaret Hartley, lying on the floor of the study. But what made Emma gasp wasn't the sight of her dead mother. It was what was visible in the mirror behind her. In the reflection, Margaret wasn't alone. The woman, Sarah Morrison, stood over her, and her hands were around Margaret's throat. "We found this photograph on your mother's phone," Detective Rivera said quietly. "It was taken at 11:47 p.m. on the night she died. The medical examiner found bruising on her neck, consistent with strangulation, but there were no signs of forced entry, no evidence of anyone else being in the house." "Ms. Hartley, can you explain this photograph?" Emma couldn't speak. She stared at the image, her mind refusing to process what she was seeing. Finally, she managed, "That's not possible. There's no one else in that photo. It's just a reflection. A trick of the light. We considered that, but look closer." Emma looked. In the mirror's reflection, Sarah's face was perfectly clear, captured in high definition by her mother's phone camera, and she wasn't looking at Margaret. She was looking directly at the camera, directly at whoever was viewing the photograph, directly at Emma. "Ms. Hartley, I need to ask, have you been to the house since your mother died?" "Yes, I'm staying there now. Going through her things." Detective Rivera's expression tightened. "I would strongly advise against that. Until we complete our investigation, the house should be considered a potential crime scene." But Emma barely heard her. Her mind was racing, pieces falling into place. Her father had seen Sarah in the mirror. He'd tried to get rid of it, but couldn't, and now her mother was dead, strangled by someone who couldn't possibly exist. "Detective, I need to go back to the house." "Miss Hartley, I just said, please, there's something I need to check. Something in my father's journal." Against the detective's advice, Emma drove back to the house on Maple Street. The rain had started again, a heavy downpour that made the streets slick and the visibility poor. She parked in the driveway and sat for a moment, staring at the dark windows of her childhood home. Inside, Emma went straight to the study. The mirror seemed to loom larger than before, its carved frame casting twisted shadows on the walls. Emma forced herself to look at her reflection. She was there, alone. No Sarah Morrison, no spectral figure, just Emma, wet and shivering from the rain. She picked up her father's journal and flipped to the last entry again. "May 22, 1994. I know who she is now. I found records at the library, the Morrison family. There was a daughter, Sarah. She died in 1952. They found her in front of this mirror. Her throat was cut. They never found who did it. But I know. God help me. I know." Emma read the words over and over. But I know. Her father had known who killed Sarah Morrison. But how? And why did he write it like a confession? She pulled out her laptop again and did a deeper search. This time, she looked for information about Thomas Hartley himself, about his family history. What she found made her stomach turn. Thomas Hartley had been adopted. His birth name was Thomas Morrison. He'd been born in Salem, Oregon in 1948. His parents were John and Elizabeth Morrison, Sarah Morrison's parents. Sarah hadn't been murdered by a stranger. She'd been killed by her own brother, John Morrison Jr., in a fit of rage. But John Jr. had died in a car accident before the police could arrest him. The family, destroyed by scandal and grief, had put everything in storage and left Salem. Young Thomas, only 4 years old, had been adopted by a family in Portland and raised as Thomas Hartley. Emma's father was Sarah Morrison's nephew, but that still didn't explain the mirror or the figure Emma and her mother had seen. Emma stood up and walked to the mirror, pressing her palms against the cold glass. "What do you want?" she whispered. "Why are you doing this?" The reflection didn't answer, but as Emma stared into her own eyes, she noticed something. There was a small inscription carved into the bottom of the frame, so tiny she'd missed it before. She knelt down to read it. "Sarah M., beloved daughter, taken too soon. May she find the truth she seeks. The truth she seeks." Emma's mind raced. Sarah was looking for something, not revenge, not to hurt people. She was looking for the truth about her death. But everyone involved was long dead. John Morrison Jr., her killer, had died in 1952. Sarah's parents were gone. There was no truth left to find. Unless Emma ran upstairs to her old bedroom and grabbed the photograph she'd seen in the newspaper article. The one of Sarah standing in front of the mirror. She'd saved it to her phone. Emma zoomed in again on the blurred figure in the reflection. the man reaching towards Sarah's throat. It wasn't her father. Emma had been wrong about that. But the man did look familiar. She expanded the image as much as she could, clarifying the features, and then she saw it. A ring on the man's finger. A distinctive gold ring with a red stone. Emma had seen that ring before, in a photograph of her grandfather, Thomas Hartley's adoptive father, Robert Hartley. With shaking hands, Emma searched for information about Robert Hartley. He'd been a businessman in Portland, successful and well-respected. He died in 1989, but in 1952 he'd been living in Salem. He'd been friends with the Morrison family. He'd been at their house the night Sarah died. The pieces fell into place with horrifying clarity. Robert Hartley had killed Sarah Morrison, not John Jr. The police had gotten it wrong, or maybe the Hartley family had paid them to get it wrong. John Jr.'s death had been convenient, a scapegoat for a crime he didn't commit. And when the scandal died down, Robert Hartley had adopted the Morrison family's youngest son, Thomas, raising him as his own. Emma's father had figured it out. That's what the journal entry meant. He'd realized that his adoptive father, the man who raised him, was a murderer. And the mirror knew. Somehow the mirror held Sarah's memory, her final moments, and it was trying to reveal the truth. But her father hadn't told anyone. He'd kept the secret, locked the mirror away, and eventually the stress and guilt had killed him. A heart attack, sudden and fatal, at age 46. And her mother, who'd lived with the mirror all those years, had paid the price too. Now it was Emma's turn. Sarah's reflection was going to keep appearing, keep terrorizing anyone connected to the Hartley family, until the truth came out. Emma grabbed her phone and called Detective Rivera. "I know what happened. I know who killed Sarah Morrison." "Ms. Hartley, Sarah Morrison died over 70 years ago. The case is closed. Please just listen. My grandfather, Robert Hartley, killed her. I can prove it. The mirror. It's not cursed or haunted. It's evidence. There's a photograph. You can see him in the reflection. The ring on his finger, I can match it to photos of my grandfather. Please, you have to reopen the case." There was a long silence. Finally, Detective Rivera said, "Send me everything you have. I'll take a look." Emma did. She sent the photograph, her father's journal entries, everything she'd found. Then she went back to the study and stood in front of the mirror. "I'm going to tell the truth," she said to her reflection, to Sarah. "Everyone is going to know what happened to you. I promise." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, Emma saw the reflection change. Sarah Morrison appeared behind her just as she had before, but this time she wasn't menacing. She simply stood there, her sad eyes meeting Emma's in the glass, and then she nodded once and faded away. Emma never saw Sarah again. 3 weeks later, Detective Rivera called. The Portland Police Department, in cooperation with the Salem Police Department, had officially reopened the Sarah Morrison case. The photograph, combined with other evidence Emma had found, was enough to identify Robert Hartley as a person of interest. Though he was long dead, the truth could finally be told. Sarah's name was cleared of any suspicion of suicide, and her family's insistence that she would never have taken her own life was vindicated. Emma donated the mirror to the Salem Historical Society, where it was put on display as part of an exhibit about unsolved crimes finally solved. The inscription at the bottom of the frame was preserved: "Sarah M., beloved daughter, taken too soon. May she find the truth she seeks." She had found it, and in doing so, she'd found peace. Emma sold the house on Maple Street. She couldn't live there anymore, not with the memories and the secrets it held. But sometimes, late at night, she thought about the mirror. She thought about Sarah Morrison, trapped for 70 years, trying to reveal the truth about her death. She thought about her father, who'd known but had been too afraid to speak. And she thought about the power of secrets, how they could poison a family for generations. But mostly, she thought about how sometimes the only way to be free is to face the truth, no matter how dark it might be, because the past never truly dies. It only waits, reflected in glass, for someone brave enough to look. And now, finally, the reflection was clear.